Hello, Oral Communications 2 students. Today we are going to talk about one of the most important figures in American history. In fact, he was so powerful that he changed the course of our American history. I'll bet you can guess who he is. He was such an enigmatic, powerful, dynamic speaker that people would travel for thousands of miles to hear him preach at different churches. Who could this figure be? He was so influential that people today continue to use his philosophies of nonviolent protest in order to speak out against injustices. I wonder if you can guess who this speaker could be. He's one of my favorites. If you go back in your memory to what my classroom looked like before our school was shut down, you would see posters on the walls of this favorite speaker of mine, and perhaps you remember who he is. No, guys, it's not Abe Lincoln this time. It's actually Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And I hope that today I can bring some better awareness to you about why he's so important, why we need to respect not only his words and his speeches, but also the actions that he took to help people of every race, color, creed, religion. It did not matter. This was a man of love. This was a man who was constantly working for his fellow man. So today, in order to follow along, we're going to be breaking up his bio into a few parts, but today you can go to your lesson plans and you can click on the biography.com link, and it's just going to give you an overview of who he was. If you want to read the entire page, you can do that, but let's take a look. This link tells us at the top that Martin Luther King Jr. was a scholar and a minister who led the civil rights movement. After his assassination, he was memorialized by Martin Luther King Jr. Day. We all know that, right? I mean, this is kind of like no duh. Who was Martin Luther King Jr.? And this is the overview. Martin Luther King Jr. was a Baptist minister and a civil rights activist who had a seismic impact. That's like having an earthquake, right? On race relations in the United States beginning in the mid-1950s. Among his many efforts, King headed the SLIC. It's the SCLC. I want you to try to remember that. It's the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. And through his activism and inspirational speeches, he played a pivotal role in ending legal segregation of African American citizens in the United States, as well as the creation of the Civil Rights Act and of the Voting Rights Act of 1965. So it is important to note that King won the Nobel Peace Prize in 1964, among several other honors, and he continues to be remembered as one of the most influential and inspirational African American leaders in all of history. Why do we study him in oral communications? When you say, gee, Ms. Starr, we're going to be learning a lot of history in these lectures about Dr. King. That is true, but it's important that you get the context about who he was, when he lived, why he said what he said, so we get the impact of his words, because he was so incredibly good at public speaking, and people all over the world know him. So I'm going to go ahead and close that link for biography. We don't need it. But I am going to tell you that the NobelPrize.org has a wonderful biography about him. And I'm just going to move my face to the other side of the screen and we can read a little bit about him. Okay, so this is going to repeat just a little bit. We aren't going to read the entire thing. In fact, we're going to jump over to my PowerPoint in the next video, okay? So Martin Luther King Jr. was born January 15th, 1929, and he died April 4th, 1968. He was born Michael Luther King Jr., but later he had his name changed to Martin. His grandfather began the family's long tenure as pastors of the Ebenezer Baptist Church in Atlanta, serving from 1914 to 1931. His father has served from then until the present, but don't believe that. This was written a long time ago. His father died in 1984, okay? From 1960 until his death, Martin Luther acted as co-pastor. Martin Luther attended segregated public schools in Georgia, graduating from high school at the age of 15. He received a bachelor's degree in 1948 from Morehouse College, a distinguished Negro institution of Atlanta from which both his father and grandfather had graduated. My best friend, Sabrina, her sister worked at Morehouse for a while. Okay. Where was I? So after 3 years of theological study, that's religious study, at Crozer Theological Theological Seminary in Pennsylvania, where he was elected president of a predominantly white senior class, he was awarded the B.D. in 1951. With a fellowship won at Crozer, he enrolled in graduate studies at Boston University, completing his residence for a doctorate in 1953 and receiving the degree in 1955. In Boston, he met and married Coretta Scott, a young woman of uncommon intellectual and artistic attainments. These are 2 sons and 2 daughters were born into the family. Now, we're just going to read a little bit more on this Nobel Peace Prize site. It says, in 1954, Martin Luther King became pastor of the Dexter Avenue Baptist Church in Montgomery, Alabama. Always a strong worker for civil rights for members of his race, King was by this time a member of the executive committee of the NAACP, and that's the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, the leading organization of its kind in the nation. We're going to skip the next part because I'm going to talk to you about that in my PowerPoint slideshow, and we're going to go to the next paragraph. It says, in 1957, he was elected president of what we said before, the SLIC, the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, an organization formed to provide new leadership for the now burgeoning civil rights movement. The ideals for this organization he took from Christianity, yes, its operational techniques, though, from Gandhi. And that's important to note because he was a nonviolent leader in India, okay? In the 11-year period between 1957 and 1968, King traveled over 6 million miles and spoke over 2,500 times, appearing wherever there was injustice, protest, and action. And meanwhile, he wrote 5 books as well as numerous articles. And in those years, he led a massive protest in Birmingham, Alabama. It caught the attention of the entire world. And I'm going to talk to you about that in the next video when we have my PowerPoint lecture. Let's skip down, though, close to the end. At the age of 35, Martin Luther King Jr. was the youngest man to have received the Nobel Peace Prize. When notified of his selection, he announced that he would turn over the prize money of over $54,000 to the furtherance of the civil rights movement. So he didn't even keep the money himself. And on the evening of April 4th, 1968, while standing on the balcony of his motel room in Memphis, Tennessee, where he was to lead a protest march in sympathy with striking garbage workers of the city, he was assassinated. In the next video, I'm going to show you personal pictures that I have from my trip to the Civil Rights Museum in Memphis, Tennessee. I went to the Lorraine Motel where he was assassinated, and it was an incredibly powerful experience. So that's it for this video. And the next one, it's going to be my personal PowerPoint, and I'm going to highlight the important actions in his life, some of the important protests, so that way you get a sense of who he was and what he was doing, and then his eventual assassination before we read I Have a Dream. So that's all for this video.